So, good afternoon. We are back with the Smart Society Science Café video interviews, this time with Michael Rovatsos, Senior Lecturer at School of Computing, University of Edinburgh, and within Smart Society Project, leader of Work Package 6, Compositionality and Social Orchestration. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
So, can you tell us about your research?
So my research is in artificial intelligence, in multi-agent systems more specifically, and I'm basically interested in systems of intelligent agents, which can be programs or robots or even humans, interacting with each other, and I'm interested in understanding how we can better organize these systems, whether the individuals are collaborating or competing with each other, and developing intelligent technologies for supporting also human designers in building such systems.
Right. And how does this relate to your work within the Smart Society project?
So within Smart Society, we're interested in compositionality. So compositionality is a property of traditional computer systems where if you put two things together in a well-defined system, you would understand how the whole system then behaves, that is composed of the two or of several units. In systems that involve humans, we know that this often breaks because people behave in unexpected ways, because there are emergent phenomena, and because there are issues that we need to deal with that we could not anticipate at design time. So our work in Work Package 6 is to develop what we call methods for social orchestration, so methods for putting together collectives of humans and machines to solve complex tasks. So let me give you an example. If you're traveling together with other people and you want to share a car or even public transport, then you would have different service providers and users coming together, forming teams. We need to find out how these teams should be formed. We need to provide a software infrastructure to make that possible. And we need to have the algorithms that make it easier to suggest the right tasks to the right people, so that you can actually achieve uptake and to use intelligent technologies in supporting a human collective in doing that.
So it's more about supporting users. It's not really about kind of turning people into robots, right? Because I think some people might get scared about
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the actual vision we have of these systems is one of co-design and co-creation of content. So what we find very often is that there's plenty of systems out there that make people collaborate, but typically that's only based on the designer's view. So in the long term, we would like something that adapts to the user needs and where the system evolves based on what the participating users and their communities want. So take Wikipedia as an example that has some scaffolding, that is the actual software where it runs and where content can be contributed, but then there is a community that evolves its own rules, its own hierarchies, its own social norms, and its ways of dealing with each other to actually make sure it's a sustainable community that keeps producing content in a high quality and productive way. So you're right, you're absolutely right. Ultimately, from the user's point of view, that difference in technology will be noted as a difference in usability. You know, the user will experience something that adapts better to what they want, not only what they want as an individual, but also what they want as a collective. And I think this is where Smart Society is different from other approaches, because we are not mainly focusing on the user interface or on having a fancy design for the web page. We're interested in questions such as, how do we detect that groups are forming? How do we make sure that these groups have their interests represented? How do we make sure that if you have a global objective, let's say you want a high quality encyclopedia, you're measuring that somehow, how we can both enable people to do that, but also maybe sometimes try and give them incentives to behave correctly so that high quality content will be produced. So these are the kinds of questions ultimately helping us to engineer systems that are more useful.
Right. And as a scientist, what do you consider the most interesting and appealing aspects of the Smart Society project?
So, in principle, it's very easy to create some kind of software platform on the internet where people can get together and do some things together, right? In this very general sense. The real question is, how do you get them to focus on the things that are useful to them? How do you make that easy? And how do you cut down this complexity that is inherent to kind of human society? I mean, if you think of normal interaction in the real world, we also have, millions of ways in which we could engage with social activities. But we make very specific choices about which ones are beneficial, and we need to agree and negotiate with the others in those respective groups to make that work. So let me give you an example. When you go on a product recommendation website, if you go on Amazon and you want to buy a book, then you obviously have millions of products you could buy. And there is some clever engine, some clever algorithm that tries to give you targeted recommendations, both to make you happier and to increase the sales of the company, of course. Similarly, you can think of all the possible combination of, for example, all possible people traveling together from A to B for all possible locations, but that's surely not what the user wants to see. What the user wants to see is, where do I want to go? What are my constraints? Do I like traveling early? Do I like traveling late? How much money am I willing to spend? And then to not only filter out the things that are irrelevant, but also to try and focus on the things that are likely to happen. So this means taking into account the preferences of everybody who's involved. And so, for example, female commuters may find it safer to be in a car with not just one male driver. And you want to both find out what the drivers want and what the commuters want. So we have kind of two different ways of looking at collectives. On the one hand, we have people, groups with different skills, different resources, different expertise. On the other hand, we have categories of people based on their preferences. There are people who have more money or have less money. There are people who like driving. There are people who like being in the passenger seat. So we are trying to get to a point where, rather than thinking about the individual in these terms, we can think about collectives. And if you look at the internet nowadays, this is very much what the most successful applications do well. So it's not about specializing and focusing on a very small number of people, but rather leveraging the huge numbers of people who are out there. So nowadays, it's not difficult to find someone who would be interested in doing something. We all know this. There's specialized web pages for every kind of niche interest. The question is, how do you mobilize these people? How do you get them to look at the right thing? And how do you get them to engage? And I think that's the most fascinating kind of scientific question behind the whole project.
Okay, thanks, Michael. One last question for you. Which kind of impacts do you expect to achieve through the Smart Society project?
So my view on it is very much one that's based on how can we identify better engineering principles for these systems. So people on a daily basis interact with bespoke applications that have been very well designed and adapted to particular communities by their respective designers. However, how that's done is by and large a black art, right? So we cannot give a person who wants to build such a system the tools and frameworks and off-the-shelf algorithms to do that easily, right? So every new system they build is a risk because we haven't understood under what conditions these systems work and when they don't work. So I think that by advancing the science, by the underpinnings, the scientific underpinnings of these kinds of applications, we can come up with engineering principles that will actually help people build such systems more easily in the future and more reliably, and also, and this is maybe a more visionary objective, to get to a point where relatively non-expert people can be involved in that process. So again, going back to Wikipedia, a simple user can, if they mobilize enough other people, affect a change on the social rules of those systems, or even on the technology. And what we would like would be, of course, in a way, software for communities and software for large-scale global communities, where the communities are not just the users, but also the designers of these systems in the long term.
Which goes back to this co-design paradigm that we were mentioning before, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much. This was Michael Rovatsos on the Smart Society Science Café. For more videos, follow us on our YouTube channel. Stay tuned.